where we are and where we are going. With new modernized tools and platforms, we are showcasing our data in more innovative ways, including our StatsCan app. En tant que citoyenne, je suis incroyablement fier du fait que nous ayons atteint un taux de réponse de 98%, malgré les difficultés que nous avons connues en 2021. Vagues de chaleur, incendies, tragédies nationales et pandémies. I profoundly thank all Canadians for their participation in the census and making such a high response rate a reality. We know that the information presented here today will help inform the development of sound public policy across the country and in all communities. This includes everything from locations of schools and daycares to hospitals, vaccine allocations, and emergency response programs that impact all Canadians. Statistics
Canada has adapted the census to the new realities of COVID-19. Everything from recruitment to data collection has been done with safety in mind, ensuring that the health of Canadians, both respondents and staff, is a top priority.
The 2021 census was conducted safely and securely, allowing Canadians to tell their stories that are reflected in the updated portrait of the country. To all organizations who encourage completion of the census, I'm pleased to say that payoff is now here in the form of high-quality census data that decision makers and policymakers can rely on to shape the country's future.
We are proud to present the key findings of this second release of the 2021 census. After our presentation, we will be available to answer your questions.
Merci.
Thank you, Jeff. I'll be starting. Good morning, everybody. My name is Laurent Martel. I am the director of the Center for Demography at Statistics Canada and responsible of the release today. Today, Statistics Canada continues to tell the stories of Canadians throughout the country with this second release of the 2021 census. This new release focuses on population age structure, sex at birth and gender, as well as type of dwellings. Our journey to release all census information will continue in 2022 with the next releases set in July and August, focusing on families, households, marital status, as well as on languages spoken by Canadians. This presentation will be performed in both official languages. I'll be also referring to the PowerPoint presentation that I assume everybody had a chance to get a copy. So I'm now switching to the next slide. A number of census products are released today by Statistics Canada, and they are, of course, available free on our website. Key findings and stories can be found in 4 analytical documents. We have released today 2 dailies articles available on the landing page of Statistics Canada website. The first one focuses on key findings related to the Canadian age structure, focusing on stories such as population aging. And the other document, the other daily released today, is focusing on gender, which has been measured for the first time using the 2021 census. There are also 2 census in briefs released today, 2 other analytical documents, which have very interesting stories on generations that are seen in the Canadian population currently. We're talking about their size in the population. And the second one is about trends related to seniors age 85 and over, as it is an important population, an important and growing, fast-growing population. Included in these 4 analytical documents are interesting charts, there are maps, and of course, there are also international comparisons that are available. On Statistics Canada website, you will also find many data products, and including, of course, census data tables, several visualization tools allowing you to quickly and easily access the data and play with it at any levels of geography, including for communities throughout the country. There are also a number of reference products that are available today on Statistics Canada website, including, for example, videos explaining the concept behind sex at birth and gender. So you're all invited to refer to these documents as well today. I will now move to the key finding from this second release of the census data, focusing first on the Canadian age structure. One of the key highlights of this release is the fact that Canada is at a very special place right now. We could even say it's a date with demographic destiny, as the number and the share of people between age 55 and 64 who are close to retirement, usually, among this population, this working age population, 15 to 64, has never been that high. So on the chart displayed in the PowerPoint presentation, the line in red shows the number of people 55 to 64, and in blue you have the number of people aged 15 to 24, and the gap between those two populations, so one about to exit the labor force and one about to enter the labor force, has never been that high as in 2021. Actually, 1 in 5 Canadians among the working age population is currently between age 55 and 64, likely to exit the labor force, if not already done. There are very large implications of this situation, and it is certainly one factor explaining the current labor shortages that Canada is experiencing. There are some differences among regions of the country, of course, related to the working age population, on which depends the labor force. As a share of the total population, it is higher in the Northwest Territories, in Yukon, in Alberta, in Ontario, and in British Columbia. And as a share, it is lower in the Atlantic provinces and Quebec. Often, regions where the share is higher are regions benefiting from migrations, either international migration or internal migration, so shifts or exchange between the different regions of the country. A larger working age population also means less people who are economically dependent to support, such as young children and older seniors. Now, some demographers in the world are talking about a demographic dividend for regions where the working age population is proportionally more important than in other areas. On the next slide, you will see that a larger size of the population aged 15 to 64, so the working age population again, is often found in downtowns of Canada's largest urban centers. And you have a map on in the PowerPoint to show some of these downtowns of large urban centers across the country. So for example, Calgary. In Calgary, there are more than 4 out of 5 people who are between age 15 and 64, and it is the highest share among all large urban centers of the country. At the opposite, Drummondville in Quebec, a new census metropolitan area in 2021, has only slightly more than 1 in 2 people living there that are between the age of 15 to 64. Now, those differences can have large implications as well on the availability of potential workers for the labor force, on service delivery for local population, and on labor shortages experienced at the local area level.
We can now look at the structure by age of the Canadian population in general, which can easily be described using a population pyramid, which is available on slide 7 here of the PowerPoint. The blue line represents the 2021 age pyramid. On the left, we have men, on the right, women. In green, the age pyramid in 1971, so right after the famous baby boom period in Canada. It is remarkable to observe that in 2021, baby boomers who were born during that period are still the most highly populated age group in the country. Today, They are between 56 and 75 years of age, and I will come back and tell you more characteristics of that group later. On the 2021 age period, we also see the effect of large immigration in Canada, which is visible between the 25 to 40-year age group. At the base of the pyramid, we also see the effect of the decrease in fertility and birth rate in Canada, rather. 2020 was a historic low, 1.4 children per woman in that year. If that decline were to continue over the coming years, the demographic aging could be even more intense than anticipated. 1 in 5 women in Canada has been shown to have the intention to wait to give birth till later in life because of the COVID-19 pandemic. On the next slide, you can see that the number of people 85 years of age and older is also very rapidly increasing at present. In 2021, as I said, this is a very quickly growing age group. That is also the case for people who are of 100 years of age and older. There are a little over 9,500 people over the age of 100 in Canada. This is an important age group to look at because of medical care and other services being more important for this age group. The number of people 85 years and older will increase even more rapidly over the coming years based on Statistics Canada's findings. In 9 years from now, in 2031, the first people born in the baby boom will already be 85, and therefore the 85 and over age group in Canada will quickly increase, and by 2051 could reach about 3 million people. So, of course, these trends could have serious impacts, in particular on at-home care services, healthcare services across the country, and also on policies on end of life, and even organizations across the country, and on our rural regions, and so forth. Even if population aging is speeding up in Canada, Canada does have one of the youngest populations in all of the G7 countries. Japan has the highest number of 65-year-old citizens and older at over 30% of the population, or 3 people in 10 in Japan, which is much higher than in Canada. In the United States, this proportion of seniors is a little lower than in Canada. The life expectancy in Canada is slightly lower than in Canada. Even if population aging is a phenomenon that affects all areas of Canada, it is not happening at the same speed in each region. It's happening faster in the Atlantic provinces, for example, in Newfoundland and Labrador, where the proportion of seniors has increased by 4.2% since 2016. That is the highest increase in this proportion of seniors of all provinces and territories. We also know that Newfoundland and Labrador has the lowest birth rate in the country and attracts a relatively low number of international immigrants each year. On the other hand, the increase in seniors was only at 0.6% in Nunavut, which has a completely different population makeup from the rest of Canada. One third of Nunavut's population is currently under the age of 15.
Sur la diapositive suivante,
Let's look at the next slide, slide 11 of the PowerPoint available to you. You can see that in major urban centers in the country, the average age is lower than in other regions, especially compared to rural regions. However, we also notice major differences between each city. For example, more than 1 in 4 people in Trois-Rivières, a city in Quebec, are over the age of 50. However, in Calgary, this proportion is much lower. It's only approximately 1 in 7 people over the age of 50. There are also fewer seniors in Toronto. Another indicator of significant change in Canada's population is the difference between children under 15 and those over the age of 65 is increasing. Again, we're looking at people born during the baby boom. In 2016, that was the first time that people over the age of 65 was greater than the number of people younger than 15. Statistics Canada demographic forecast shows that the difference between these two groups should continue to increase over the next 3 decades.
Le fait que les personnes âgées soient aujourd'hui plus
The fact that older Canadians are a higher, more numerous group than Canadians younger than 15 is something that we see across Canada. Across Canada, we see this in the prairies and in the territories. And I'm highlighting here that, in particular, Nunavut, again, has a completely different population makeup with a much younger population. In Newfoundland and Labrador, people under the age of 15 are the smallest group across the country. And as I said, the birth rate is the lowest in Newfoundland of anywhere in Canada.
The release today also includes 2 documents, as I said in the introduction of this presentation, which are focusing on specific topic. One of them is about generations that we found in the Canadian population. So about generations, the baby boom generation is still the most important within the Canadian population, despite the fact that baby boomers are now aged between 56 and 75 years old. On the chart displayed on slide 14 of the PowerPoint presentation, the baby boom cohorts are represented by the line in gray, color gray. The line in blue shows the millennials generation, who are getting slowly closer to the number of baby boomers in the Canadian population. Of course, millennials are much younger right now, in their 20s and in their 30s. It is expected that by 2021, and that's according to population projections, millennials will become the largest generation in the country, but not before 2029, sorry. And finally, it is interesting to note that the X generation, displayed also on the chart, and the X generation are people that are currently in their 40s, has never been and will never be the largest generation within the Canadian population. The X generation is composed of fewer individuals that were born in the late 1960s and during the 1970s, at a time where fertility rate was dropping quite significantly in the country. I'm now at slide number 16 of the PowerPoint presentation. So Statistics Canada today is very proud to release for the first time data on gender as measured with the 2021 census. Canada is a world leader in measuring trans and non-binary populations using the census. Last March 31st, Statistics Canada also released many reference products, such as a video explaining the concepts of gender and sex at birth. One of the goals of these reference documents is to increase the statistical literacy of the Canadian population on these topics and explain why Statistics Canada is measuring them and for what purpose. These documents are, of course, accessible as we speak on Statistics Canada website. Slide number 17 now shows that the vast majority of the population aged 15 and over in the country, that's actually more than 99%, are cisgender men or cisgender women, meaning that their sex at birth and gender are the same. Slightly more than 100,000 people were identified as transgender or non-binary people using the census, representing 0.33% of the Canadian population aged 15 and over. So among this transgender and non-binary population, 2 in 5 were actually non-binary people, and about 60% of this population were identified as transgender, with slightly more transgender women than transgender men. Slide 17 shows some significant variation according to age and to generations. So the share of transgender and non-binary people was much larger among age group of 15 to 24 and 25 to 40 than among the population, the older population aged 55 and over. In other words, there were much more people belonging to the Z generation and the millennials generation who identified being transgender or non-binary people compared to the baby boom generation or generation that are older than the baby boom generations. On slide 18, you can also see that the share of transgender people and non-binary people among, again, this 15 and over population varied greatly from one region to the next in the country. More than 1 in 2 transgender and non-binary people are actually living in Canada's 6 largest urban centers. And among large urban centers, the share of transgender and non-binary people was higher in Victoria and in Halifax, and lower among many Quebec's largest cities, such as Drummondville, Saguenay, Trois-Rivières, or Quebec City. Now, locations such as Victoria or Halifax on the 2 coasts are known to have some important post-secondary institutions that attracts many young adults. So part of the reason why we are observing more trans and non-binary people in these areas is certainly related to this situation. The 2021 census also asked people to describe their gender via a write-in response so that they could indicate what term they were most relevant to them. Statistics Canada analyzed the answers provided by Canadians in order to show the diversity of the non-binary population living in Canada. The most common answer provided was non-binary, and the other common responses provided were gender fluid, agender, other gender, queer, or neither man nor woman. Now, it is likely that this terminology will continue to evolve in coming years as the society continues to change. Some Canadians might also become more at ease in coming years in declaring a different gender than men or women as social acceptability evolves as well. We have been actually seeing such trends with, for example, same-sex couples measured for the first time in the 2001 census. Sorry. Alors, avant de conclure cette présentation,
Before
cet
I
aperçu des
conclude this
grands résultats de cette
presentation
deuxième
on an
diffusion des données du
overview of the
recensement de
second
2021, un mot sur les types de logements au
I'll
Canada.
speak briefly
Une information
about
que
the
Statistique
type
Canada
of dwellings,
diffuse également aujourd'hui.
which is another type of
Alors,
data
il
that
s'agit d'une
Statistics
première
Canada
diffusion
is
sur les
sharing
types de
today.
logements au Canada. Une autre diffusion plus complète
So there
avec
will be
davantage de
also
caractéristiques sur les
more
logements
details
suivra le
and more
21 septembre
characteristics
prochain.
of dwellings on
Nous pourrons à ce
September
moment-là, par exemple,
21st
obtenir
of
des
this year.
statistiques sur les
At that time,
propriétaires des
there
logements
will
au
be
Canada.
details on owners of
Alors,
dwellings
entre
in
2016 et
Canada.
2021, la
Between
croissance du nombre de
2016 and
logements au
2021,
Canada a encore
the
surpassé celle de la
growth in
population,
numbers of
comme
dwellings
c'est d'ailleurs le cas
once
depuis de
again
nombreux recensements.
was higher
En fait, sur
than
le
the
graphique qu'on
increase in
peut voir
population.
à la diapositive numéro 21 de
We're
la
on
présentation
slide
PowerPoint,
21 of the
dans les années
PowerPoint.
70, en fait, la
And we can
croissance du
see
nombre de logements au
that
Canada
in the
surpassait de
70s, the number
la
of
croissance de
the
la
increase
population.
rather in number
À
of
cette
dwellings in
époque,
Canada
de
was higher
nombreux
than the
baby
increase in
boomers, par exemple,
population.
quittaient leurs parents, le foyer de leurs parents,
Baby
pour
boomers at that
fonder
time were
eux-mêmes leur
leaving
propre
their
famille.
parents'
Donc, les
dwelling
besoins en
to
logement
start
à
their own
l'époque étaient
family. So at that time,
importants.
the need for dwellings
Évidemment,
was
il y a
significant.
des différences régionales
Of
qui
course, there
existent
are,
en 2021.
once again,
Et il y
regional
a des régions
differences
au
in
Canada où,
2021.
en fait, la croissance
And
démographique est
there are regions in
supérieure à la
Canada
croissance
where,
des
in
logements.
fact,
Donc, la
the
moyenne
population
nationale
increase
masque
is
également
higher
des
than the
variations
increase
selon
in the
les
number of
différentes régions
dwellings.
du pays. Alors, nous avons diffusé aujourd'hui les données
Today,
aussi
we
sur les types
released
de logements.
data
On
on
peut
the types
dire
of
de cette
dwellings
diffusion
as well.
qu'actuellement, les appartements au Canada
We can see
représentent
that apartments in
41%
Canada
de tous
make
les
up
logements. Et
41%
c'est
of all
une
dwellings.
proportion qui est à la hausse depuis
And
quelques
this,
recensements.
the proportion of
Alors, ce
this
sont
group
les
has
appartements
been
dans un immeuble de 5
continuously
étages ou
increasing.
plus qui ont cru
In an
le plus
apartment in a
rapidement
building
depuis
that has
2016. Principalement, en fait, dans les grands centres urbains
has
du Canada.
increased the most quickly, especially in urban centers in the country. The increase in apartments in duplexes or the increase in semi-detached houses was much more modest than it was in 2016.
Alors, je termine là-dessus. Je vous rappelle, tout le monde, qu'il s'agit aujourd'hui d'une
I will
deuxième
conclude on
diffusion des
this,
résultats
and
du
I would like to
recensement
remind
2021.
everyone that this is the
5
second
autres
release
diffusions
of
auront lieu
the
dans les prochaines
2021
semaines, dans les
census.
prochains mois.
5 more releases
La
are to
prochaine étant
follow
le 1er
in the
juillet
coming months.
prochain sur les familles, les ménages et
The
l'état
next one
matrimonial des
on
Canadiens.
July
Alors, je vous
13th.
invite évidemment à vous joindre de nouveau à
I
nous
encourage you
à ces occasions,
to
et nous
tune
pourrons
in
à ce moment-là
with us
compléter
again
davantage
on those
le portrait,
dates
de la
as we
population
will
canadienne.
present for you a more detailed portrait of
Je vous
Canada.
remercie de votre attention et
Thank
me
you for
fera plaisir
listening,
de répondre
and
à
it will
vos
now be my
questions
pleasure
dans les
to
prochaines
answer your
minutes,
questions
dans la langue officielle
in
de
the
votre
official
choix.
language of your
Merci.
choice. Thank you.
Thank you. As there are no questions in the room, we will go directly to Zoom. If you have a question, please raise your hand on Zoom. Si vous avez une question, s'il vous plaît, utilisez la fonction lever la main. So our first question will be from Laura Osman.
Thank you so much. I'm just trying to understand, several experts have talked about this kind of coming crisis in terms of care as we expect the over 85 population to expand rapidly over the next 10 years. Could that be offset by the fact that millennials are likely to overtake the baby boomers in 2029 in terms of being able to afford that care?
Good question. What I can say about this is the fact I can confirm using our population projections that, the results first of the 2021 census shows that there's this 85 population in Canada is a fast growing population, actually the fastest growing population among all age groups included in the Canadian population. And this growth of the 85 plus population would even be higher starting in 2026 with the arrival of the first baby boomers at that age. And of course, we all know that by age 85 and especially above that age, activity limitations, your needs in terms of your healthcare needs are much greater, as often, you have more health issues. So there are impacts, large impacts of this expected rapid growth between 2026 and 2046, there are large impacts, especially for the healthcare system. Now, you know, our projection shows that the millennials will overtake the baby boom cohort in terms of numbers by about 2029. It means, and with sustained immigration levels, it means that the number of people within the working age population will be significant to deliver services to all of the population. That's for sure. But at the same time, you know, when we're thinking about, you know, the healthcare system, what's important is numbers. Numbers of 85 plus are really the key indicator here. And by 2051, we were using the projections, we're showing that this population, 85 and over, could be close to 3 million Canadians. That's much more than what we're currently seeing. We're getting closer now to 1 million, so the population could, the 85 plus population could triple over the next 2 decades in this country, and that's the key indicator to take into consideration in terms of impacts on the healthcare system and the home care services needed to deliver services to this specific population.
Thank you. That's so helpful. And so for policymakers who are looking at this shrinking workforce and this growing number of people who need care, how much runway do you think they have to start to develop a game plan to deal with this?
Well, that's obviously a question for policymakers. I mean, they will have to find ways to deal with the situation, but they certainly can look at what other countries, for example, have done throughout the world. And Canada, as I said, is among the youngest countries right now in the G7, despite our rapid population aging. Countries like Japan, like most European countries, France, Germany, United Kingdom, they are not United Kingdom, but France and Germany, Italy, for example, are ahead of us in their process towards population aging, and we certainly can learn from their experiences out there. Some countries have taken different measures, such as shifting towards more home care services and making sure that seniors can stay as long as possible in their community rather than getting into institutions. So, I mean, there's been different approach developed throughout the world, and that's certainly things that Canada could look to prepare for this rapid aging of the population.